So I'll now hand over to our Chief Executive, Jo Pike, who will be sharing some of her thoughts about what lies ahead. Jo will be looking to the future. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Can you hear me everywhere in the auditorium? Yes. As has been pointed out, I'm quite short, so I'm nearer to the microphones, so there's always a bonus. So I'm Jo Pike, and I'm the Chief Executive, as Kenny has just told you. It's lovely to see everybody here today, and welcome also to those of you who have taken the trouble to join us online. Having spent the morning looking back at the past year and some of its highlights, I'm going to spend the next few minutes looking to the future. But before I do that, in our 60th anniversary year, I could hardly fail to acknowledge our beginnings back in 1964, when a group of people who were passionately committed to advancing the conservation of Scotland's biodiversity for the benefit of present and future generations came together to create the Scottish Wildlife Trust. There was debate at the time about whether there should be a series of regional entities, but they reached the firm conclusion that it should be a Scotland-wide body. This is a photo of one of the early meetings with our founder, Sir Charles Connell, in the middle, and we owe him, of course, an enormous debt of gratitude. If you're interested, you can hear me reflect a bit more on the Trust's beginnings in the first episode of our 60th anniversary podcast series, all of which is now available on our website. So, looking ahead, I'll begin with the first few months, and then I'll look ahead to the next few years, and at the end I will attempt to give some reflections on what the next few decades might look like. One of the Trust's core values is that we're pioneering. We've seen that on multiple fronts over 6 decades, from groundbreaking work on peatland restoration and beaver reintroduction to early advocacy on natural capital, nature finance and nature networks. This week, we've been acting in that pioneering spirit, using technology that wouldn't have been available to us for most of the Trust's history, by undertaking a thermal drone survey of the deer population in the northwest of Scotland. And this technology is still relatively new, but this work that we have carried out literally just this week is, to the best of our knowledge, the largest area that has ever been surveyed in this way. So it's certainly pioneering. And in the coming months, we'll be using this data to inform discussions about deer management across the Coyock and Assynt living landscape. Another of our core values is that we collaborate. And an excellent example of that is Saving Scotland's red squirrels. Led by the Trust, it's a joint effort between the Trust and Nature Scot, Scottish Forestry, Forestry and Land Scotland, RSPB, Scottish Land and Estates, Aberdeen City Council, Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, but also, crucially, along with a host of volunteers and members of the public. SSRS has been collecting public squirrel sightings since 2010, so nearly a quarter of the Trust's history. And the Great Scottish Squirrel Survey returns this autumn, so all of you can get involved. Last year, we received a massive 17,016 sightings, giving us our second highest recording year to date, and 1,959 of those came in during just 1 week. This year's Red Squirrel Awareness Week is happening between the 30th of September and the 6th of October, and we want to see more people than ever looking out for both red and grey squirrels. Public sightings play a key role in informing red squirrel conservation efforts, and you can find all the details at scottishsquirrels.org.uk, so I definitely encourage you to do that. Now, my final example from the coming months illustrates our core value of being evidence-based. And you've heard this morning about our work in Ayrshire and the Irvine to Girvan Nectar Network. Now, that has been so successful that it has now turned into the Ayrshire Nectar Network. And the team is currently finalising the write-up of a brand new method for monitoring landscape-scale change, focusing on pollinator networks. It draws on international learning from the Netherlands and combines this with on-the-ground experience in Ayrshire, putting scientific integrity, affordability and impact at the heart of the new model. A user-friendly, easy-to-follow version of this method is currently being written up. Data from volunteers is being analysed. We expect to complete that in the quieter winter months, and we anticipate being able to publish it when it's done and share it with other organisations. There are also farm surveys currently happening as part of this project, and opportunity mapping is underway, which we're hoping to have completed before the end of the year. I could have chosen many, many more examples, but that's a snapshot from the next few months. What about the next few years? So I think 3 things will be key. First of all, we want to involve even more people in the protection and restoration of nature, from all backgrounds, all walks of life. That includes, as an example, supporting coastal communities to shape the future of Scotland's seas. Now, some of you may have seen the Oceans of Value film that we produced last year. It led on to some really interesting discussions with communities, and what communities told us is that they would like help to understand better the marine environment and how they can play a more active role in future government consultations and feed into other decisions so that they can be part of shaping the future of Scotland's incredibly important marine environment. We also need to scale up, and in order to do that, one of the things that we're going to be focusing on within the Trust is working with our Riverwoods partners. To expand river woodlands across Scotland will deliver a host of benefits. Wherever you are in Scotland, you're not far from a river or a stream, and in that space near rivers and next to rivers and near rivers, there's a disproportionately high amount of biodiversity, but there's also a disproportionately amount of benefits that restoration of the riparian zone can bring. From better water quality to lower water temperature for salmon, better flood protection for communities, less soil erosion for farmers, and of course, more homes for all sorts of wildlife. Finally, we definitely need to be more joined up. And in the coming years, the Trust will be continuing to advocate for and demonstrate the benefits of being joined up. For a long time now, many of you will know that we've been champions of nature networks, and in particular encouraging leadership on nature networks from the Scottish Government and local authorities during this decade, which has been designated by the UN as the decade on ecosystem restoration. So what might the next few decades hold for us? I'll tell you what I think will be important in a moment, but before that, I started off turning to AI, which for all its many weaknesses and limitations, tends to be quite good at synthesizing large amounts of information. So, here's the question I posed. Based on the urgent need to tackle the biodiversity crisis, combined with an overview of action currently being undertaken to protect and restore ecosystems, from tried and tested ideas to emerging trends, what will be the 10 biggest things in nature conservation and restoration in the next few decades? So this is what ChatGPT came up with. And it's actually quite a good list. So, rewilding, I'm sure you'll be very pleased to see, and ecosystem restoration. Nature-based solutions to climate change and all sorts of other issues. We know that's vital. Biodiversity finance and incentives. We've talked about farmers in relation to the Nectar Network. Agroecology and sustainable agriculture is going to be massively important. Indigenous and community-led conservation, again, that links back to what I was talking about in relation to our Living Seas work with coastal communities. Of course, no list like this is going to be complete without conservation technology and AI. Protected area expansion and connectivity. Some of you in the room may be aware of the 30 by 30 commitment to achieve protected area status or some kind of protection for 30% of our land by 2030, land and seas by 2030. Bringing biodiversity into mainstream decisions, restoring large-scale ecosystems, and finally, conservation through genetic and biotechnological innovations. And I don't pretend to understand a lot of that, but also all sorts of kind of specialised areas like de-extinction and synthetic biology and so on. Now, any of those could be the subject of a whole day's event. But as I say, I think it's quite an interesting starting point. I especially like numbers 4 and 5 and 9. But I said I would tell you what I think. I think the next few decades will be about at least 3 things. And the first is purposeful optimism. I think we'll need this because we see an increasing number of people across all generations, but especially younger people, growing increasingly anxious about the lack of action for the future. But by optimism, I don't just mean hoping for the best. This is the kind of optimism that needs to last decades, so it has to have a purpose. Second, polycentricity. You can come and ask me about that afterwards so that I can bore you about it, but the best example of polycentricity is nature itself. There's no nature central that makes all of the decisions. Nature thrives through diversity and connections, with different species occupying different niches. And that's what I think we need more of in how we organise action for nature. So finally, we know we can't always bring about the changes we want by forcing people to do things differently. Of course, regulation is absolutely vital, but we can't always mandate change. We also can't necessarily expect that appealing to people's better nature will be a guarantee of success. But we can offer incentives to consumers, businesses, farmers, and so on. And we know this is a powerful driver of the kind of change that people feel they own. That's what I'd like to see governments everywhere focusing a lot more on in the coming decades. We do live in this special place, and I think there's great potential for leadership in Scotland, as well as learning, of course, and following the lead where others set the direction. So, that brings me to the end of my brief look to the future, but I'm delighted to be able to continue the conversation with our very special guest, Liz Bonnin, who many of you will know as a broadcaster, but also a wildlife biologist and, of course, the president of the Wildlife Trusts. So I'm going to invite Liz, who's already properly mic'd up, to come and join me there, where I'm going to very quickly clip on the mic seamlessly, and we're going to have a chat. So Liz, would you like to come and join me on the stage? Can you hear me still? Yeah. Right, that's worked. So, Liz, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to come and visit us in Scotland. We had a lovely evening last night with some of our young leaders who you got the chance to speak with and talk to them about some of their hopes for the future. But what I want to ask is, how did you get into the work that you're doing? And how did you get into becoming a nature broadcaster and all of the many other things that you've been doing? And then I'm going to ask you about your trip to some of our sites.
I visited 2 reserves yesterday. I think everybody's route is different to where they end up in life. Mine certainly took many different twists and turns. But I think it all started with the fact that I grew up in the south of France before moving to Ireland, which is why I speak with an Irish accent, because I learned English with an Irish accent. But I lived in the mountains north of Nice in the south of France, and we had a little wood beside our house. And so as a child, myself and my sister and our 2 dogs were always outside in the little wood with hedgehogs and snakes and insects and everything, you know, nature, bugs, spiders, butterflies, little birds that I was obsessive about. I was particularly obsessed about little birds because I couldn't understand how something so small and perfect could work, could live, could breathe. I was imagining their little hearts beating in their tiny bodies, and I was fascinated. And so I think if I think about it now, it's all about nature working its magic on me without me even knowing. And so it kept me curious and passionate, and I was just fascinated about better understanding how that little bird was alive. So I studied biology and chemistry and eventually biochemistry in uni. Then I joined a band. Then I fell into television. I drifted in my 20s in a way that a lot of people in our society tell us, you know, you need to know what you're doing in university, and then you do your PhD, and then you do this job, and then you do that. I was a bit of a waster. And when I give talks in schools, you see the teacher at the back of the class going, what is she telling them? And I'm like, stay open. It's okay not to know. It's okay to do many, many different things in your life until the day you die, actually, because I don't plan to retire. I plan to work at something I'm passionate about until the day I die. So all this to say that there's no rule of thumb about what I did and how I ended up where I ended up. But because I was drifting in my 20s, I ended up doing a little bit of television. And actually, Kenny, you mentioned Top of the Pops. I was cringing over there at the top this morning. But I drifted and fell into television, entertainment TV, but also working with producers that were saying, well, how would you cut that story together? How would you tell that story in some kind of more factual stuff than Top of the Pops, obviously. And so I learned about the creative process of storytelling. And so, long story short, I combined my first obsession with science and the natural world with this newfound passion for storytelling. And I thought, gosh, if I could tell stories about the stuff I really care about and help to inspire others to stay ignited, to stay curious about nature, wouldn't that be a great job? And so had I not been a waster in my 20s, I wouldn't have found the dream job that I didn't even know was my dream job, if that makes sense. So yeah, when people ask me for my advice about how to get into communication, I definitely caveat it by saying, there are so many ways to do this, and I'm not advising, there was no kind of like formula to it. But I think we've had a lot of conversations, both on our Isle of Wight visit, but also last night, about it's healthy to question our societal construct, for want of a better word, sort of what we're taught should be. This is how we do it. This is what you need to do in life. And to encourage ourselves to reconnect to our true humanity, which involves being a bit more floaty, does that make sense? Being a bit more relaxed about all the many talents that we might have, not just the one that we're supposed to find. And I really do feel for young people these days in education, who need to, first of all, prop up the school rating system, but then also need to know what they're doing and don't divert. So anyway, I'm rambling already, but all this to say that it's been a really incredible journey, and I feel very blessed that I've ended up where I am. And then as a communicator, I hope that I continue my job, inspiring others, not only to protect nature, but just to sort of reconnect with our true humanity, who we really are. And the two are completely interconnected, of course. And I think that will make for a better, brighter future for every living thing on this planet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like you could have gone in many different directions.
Yeah.
If you had gone in a different direction, I don't know whether you have an idea of what you would have been if you hadn't done what you have, but do you think you would still be taking action for nature in perhaps a different way, championing nature or doing something in your garden for nature?
For sure, Jo. I think there are many ways to be a champion for nature. I just happen to be a communicator, but we're all humans. We are all nature. And so I don't see any sector, any business, any profession where that can't be or shouldn't be. It should be at the very center of what we do in life, because the planet gives us everything. It's become habitable because of this wonderful interconnected web of life. And so to reciprocate, to remember what indigenous, you mentioned it in your list. I love that. It was really interesting. I'm obsessing about indigenous wisdom for a couple of projects at the moment. And what I've realized is that we were all indigenous once. We all then, some of us, became disconnected and went down a different route. But to remember who we are means to always be mindful of, what do I do in my life? What do I do in my business? How do I do that without damaging the life support systems that allow me to be alive? So everything we do, no matter what we do, we need to play a bigger role in remembering, and I'm going to give back to nature or the planet that's allowed me to take this resource and make a product, or, drive my car, but I'm going to now invest in something that is slightly more eco-friendly. So yeah. But actually, you know what, after saying, so yes, I think whatever I would have ended up doing, I would have hopefully been mindful enough to try and remember to give back to nature. But I think, even though I drifted a lot in my 20s, I was always meant to do this. So it feels like sometimes when you look back, there is a reason to things and to doors opening, and whether you pay attention, whether you walk through. I think we all do have a certain purpose, or a number of purposes in life. So in a way, I feel like this was always supposed to happen. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. I really agree with what you said about there being lots of different ways in which you can help nature. But how important do you feel that early connection with nature was, and is to people in general?
I think it's absolutely vital, but I'm also aware that not everybody is brought up in an environment where you can just let your kids go out and nature does its magic. And so as a society, it's our job to, first of all, try and make that more of a reality for most of our communities, but also then as communicators or people who work in conservation or people who work in education or actually, again, all walks of life, to take care of each other in that respect. So for those who haven't had the luck of being in a wood when they were tiny, you know, and that might have become disconnected earlier because of their situation, I think it's all of our jobs as a community to sort of embrace all members of our country or our town, and to give them that reconnection, which is what the Wildlife Trusts all across the British Isles do, right? We make nature schools. We make sure that children who are disadvantaged, you know, do get that connection.
Yeah.
So I think
starting from where people are at.
Yeah. If you didn't get it when you were young, I mean, listen, it can still reignite you. That's the magic of nature. So I think we have a responsibility to take better care of each other and to make sure that those that have been disconnected become reconnected.
Yeah. So talking about the magic of nature, yesterday you had the opportunity to visit our Loch of the Lows site and visitor centre, and also Red Moss.
And then Red Moss, and we left foggy Edinburgh, which, by the way, I think just is so dramatic in the fog and looks absolutely wonderful. But the closer we got to Loch of the Lows, I mean, the sky just opened up. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was 23 degrees or something. It was the most. I had my day of summer yesterday at Loch of the Lows. It was amazing. And we met the most incredible team. I love this position that I was so privileged to be given by the Wildlife Trust Federation because of so many reasons, not least the people that I meet at all of these reserves, members of the Wildlife Trust who just dedicate their lives to taking care of like these precious patches of wild areas or to recover patches of wild areas. And so we met Jill and we met Katrina. Bruce was the most, where's Bruce? Is he in here?
Bruce is, well, he's
pretty busy. Bruce was the host with the most. He was so informative, so kind, so welcoming, and also incredibly funny. So we had the best day. So thank you for a really wonderful day, Bruce, especially because he's so busy. So that was wonderful. And with the debate with the time capsule, there's a story I want to tell you, which probably most of you will know about because you support the Scottish Wildlife Trust, but it's about the osprey pair and that osprey cam. And it just blew my mind, and I'm completely invested now. So now I'm going to be like eyes peeled on that camera from March onwards next year. So we learned about the osprey recovery. We saw signs of nature everywhere, from beavers and the beautiful, exquisite teeth marks of, you know, all over the borders of the lake. We saw greater spotted woodpecker holes in the trees. And then we met Sue, one of the volunteers, who was just such a fountain of knowledge because she's there every Friday, but she speaks to all the visitors as well. And they all just pass on a bit of anecdotal evidence of what they've seen that day or what they think might have happened. So she's just got this, you ask her anything and she knows it. And that just really filled my heart with joy. A lot of the stuff I do for my job, you know, reports on the stuff that we're doing badly. And so to meet people from the Wildlife Trust is just one of my biggest gifts I think I was given from the Trust. And I felt that yesterday by the bucket load in Loch of the Lows.
We've got
what
some
a gorgeous place.
Amazing volunteers and staff who have worked at Loch of the Lows for many, many years in some cases, but of course, you know, people who are new to the site and just learning about how magical it is. So very special place. And people from all over the world follow the osprey camera.
Right,
so,
well, they've got another complete disciple now. And I'll tell you a bit more about what's been going on. It is drama, it is intrigue, you don't need a soap opera. It is mad what's going on with that female and what's going to happen next spring. Next spring is going to be key.
Watch this space.
Yeah. But
so you also went to Red Moss, yes.
We met Julian at Red Moss, and as we were walking on that beautiful walkway through the peatland, a raised lowland raised bog, we all commented again about the strong, powerful sense of spirituality to the place, this primeval feeling of this ancient peat that's this bubble just off Edinburgh, just off the city. There's a field, and then there's this magical, magical place, some of which is 6,000 years old. They were telling me it's a metre per, so we'd be 6,000 years to make 6 meters of the highest part of the dome. And Julian was just an amazing host again, and so natural, so relaxed, and so full of amazing information about the absolute crucial sphagnum moss, about the different types of heaths, about the sundews, and how they eke out a living in this nutrient-depleted place by just, we'll get insects then, we'll evolve to just eat the insects and get our nitrogen from them. So we were like honkered down in the squishy, beautiful peat, looking at all these amazing little plants. But then Julian was also telling me about how, because of the ditches that had been historically crisscrossing the peat to drain it when we didn't know what we were doing, you've been working very hard to put these dams in. So you identify where the peat is sort of eroded and dry, and you've been sticking dams. And there was this really, you couldn't have painted a better picture of it, where the dams were holding back the water. So this bare, eroded peat was now waterlogged, and already you could see sundews starting to grow. And he was explaining that in the drier parts there's a lot of heath, but once the water starts to kind of be conserved, more of the variety of plants will grow. And then damselflies and dragonflies were flying past. Jess spotted a toadlet. We watched the little pond that you've made, a little area just to encourage other insects. It was absolute magic. It really was.
And I think it's so appropriate that in the Trust's 60th anniversary year, you went to visit one of our peatland sites, because back in the 1990s, the Scottish Wildlife Trust was a real pioneer in peatland conservation and restoration.
Yes.
So, it has changed from being what was once effectively a Cinderella habitat, and people have now kind of woken up to the fact that it is so incredibly important.
So incredibly important, and also the importance of volunteers who every September do the walk through to get rid of the birch, get rid of the Scots pine, make sure that the area is given the best chance. We need to be realistic. And this is something that made my blood boil when they were talking about the fact that just east of there is an area of peat that is licensed to extract. And that's when my heart sank. And that's when, but in a way it just also stokes the fire in your belly of what we are facing. And both you and Kenny have mentioned this, the battle between what extraordinary conservation organizations like yourselves are achieving. Where next door still, due to policy and what we prioritize in this world, it's almost absurd to think that is still being allowed, right? So peat is basically being extracted in what's the region? Midlothian? Midlothian.
Yeah, it's around the Salerno area. So
just east of it. Sorry, I forgot the name wrong, Bruce. We were referring to.
Thanks, Bruce.
And I was just shocked and horrified to know that it's almost sort of, your brain can't register really what we're doing on one side, the amount of battles that you have just to secure enough funding to do the right thing, to secure our life support systems so that we can survive on this planet. And meanwhile, because of other vested interests, right? Down the road, we're extracting it too. So it's just to say that we still have, and we've had lots of conversations about this, that we still have a lot to fight for. And for me as a conservationist who then had to a biologist, I didn't study economics or business studies. My brain doesn't work that way. Having to lean into all the different sectors and understand, which you do beautifully, but as a biology communicator, I need to understand what it is that allows, support for a peat bog restoration on one side, but the extraction of peat on the other. What is it about our system that makes me sometimes feel the amount of work that's gone, not to waste, but it's like putting a finger in a cracking dam, especially when I see how hard you work. It makes me want to just, shake up the planet in a way. So there's never been a more important time to just think more holistically, to think just like nature and everything in the natural world is beautifully interconnected and interdependent. You can't fix one thing without the other. You can't take something out of the food web without a whole domino effect. We, as a society, have to really think holistically about how we tackle our problems and issues. And until we change our economic model, I'm going there because I've learned it, and I feel like it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. until we transform our economic model and we stop prioritizing profit and talking about GDP, which is the most absurd measure of success for a country, it was never invented for that, until we stop prioritizing that and recognizing how much we rely on nature, that is, there are 9 life support systems on our planet and we are destroying all of them at a staggering rate. Until we recognize that that is infinitely more important than answering to shareholders and having to have economic growth that constantly expands every year, which is absurd in this day and age, we will not ever really truly solve issues like peat bog restoration next door to peat bog extraction, if that makes sense. So I suppose as a biologist, one of my biggest learning lessons has been leaning into those subjects and together collectively working with economists, working with business people, working with tech people, working with conservationists. Like all of us together have to reconnect in a way that we haven't done in a long time to really tackle this issue.
Absolutely. I think leaning into those issues must be relevant to so many of the conversations that you have with other people from wildlife trusts elsewhere in the movement. Absolutely. I want to come on to that in a moment, but just before that, because we haven't had a chance to show you anything more than a snapshot of our work, I'm going to suggest we play a short video. This is the one I mentioned to you last night, which just gives a little bit of a flavour of our marine work. And I know that you're passionate about communication. So we're going to just play the short video, which is actually the trailer for the Oceans of Value film, which some of you may have seen that we made last year. Hopefully, if it comes up. And if it doesn't come up, don't worry, because we'll carry on talking. We'll carry on talking about something else. Do we have the Oceans of Value trailer there? Maybe we don't. Okay, don't worry. If we don't have it, let's carry on talking. Okay. So my point is, it links into what you were saying about everything being connected and having to think about bringing so many more people into nature conservation, and they're not just going to be the people who've perhaps traditionally been involved in nature conservation. You know, you mentioned economists and so on. But when you go to other wildlife trusts, what is there anything that has kind of surprised you about what you see going on in wildlife trusts, or the people that you meet, or anything that's kind of particularly made you feel this is part of the answer? I mean, and that's
there's so many things that I've been struck by with each and every visit, but and I could go on about that for a long time. But I suppose the one thing that's come to my head when you asked me that question is the amount of understanding and dedication and results that the Federation has achieved. And what excites me the most is how those skill sets and those learnings are now being shared in a way that perhaps historically hasn't been the case for the Federation. And when we're talking about sort of the need to reconnect, the need to work cross-sectorally, but also, you know, what will tip the needle, it's about collective power, for want of a better expression. And there is so much knowledge, so much expertise across the Federation that I don't think we're harnessing yet. So I'm visiting different sites and I'm thinking, and it is happening, by the way, don't get me wrong, but I'm really excited about the potential for that to happen more. And that means eliminating perhaps doubling up of things that people are trying out by just comparing notes and talking to each other more, but also then galvanizing what you are all doing magnificently in ways that I think I underestimated until I saw what's really happening on the ground. And I think that's what excites me most about the potential. Absolutely, we need to be aware of the vast differences with regards to legislation and policy between England and Scotland and Wales. And that needs to be respected. But even then you can compare notes at a policy level. But then when it comes to the actual skill sets of all the individuals who have learned over the years, and how it's like indigenous wisdom, you know, all through the beautiful, rich history of the trust, all that information is being passed down within each trust. And now we're really leaning into, let's share that information. That's where I get excited about, you know, there's many pieces of the puzzle about what we need to do to sort of save ourselves, but I think that's a huge piece. The clout that brings, both to governments, but also to sort of inspire business communities to lead the charge and the change. Because I personally, naively, we talked about this last night, feel that sometimes, you know, we spend so much time battling with governments. We could actually shift the needle if we get business communities and society itself to start moving the momentum so that government goes, oh, no, we agree with that, so you'll keep us in power, very crudely put, but I see so much potential, basically, is my long-winded, again, answer to your question, in the trust, that is a thing that I take with me. Every time I go to a different site and I go, oh my God, that's really exciting because they were doing that, but then if they talk to those people, that would just, that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
And as I say, it is already happening, but the potential is magnificent.
It is happening, but we need so much more of it, don't we? Because the urgency of the problems we're facing. I mean, I was just going to ask you something about climate anxiety and the fact that we see that more and more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, and how do you think we can support our staff, our volunteers, the people in communities around us to deal with that?
That's a very good question, and I think that one of the most powerful tools for change is sharing personal stories. As a communicator, we're constantly trying to see what is it that's not shifting the needle as much as we would like to see it, and we're really focusing on just personal stories, which allows somebody else to look at somebody else and go, I relate to that. Oh, I feel empathy for that. Oh, they're doing that. Maybe I could do that too. It's sometimes much more simple than we imagine it needs to be. So my personal story in all of this is I was making stories about wonderful documentaries, well, I think they were wonderful, about animal behavior and epic migrations. And then inevitably, of course, as communicators, we were seeing what was happening to the planet, and so we were leaning more into the truth of that. So I made hard-hitting documentaries like Drowning in Plastic and Meat, a Threat to a Planet, which focused on the intensive meat industry but caused a understandable furor, but it shook the status quo, which I think was important. But through those two experiences, I got very depressed and I felt really hopeless. And I got climate anxiety, eco-anxiety, all the rest of it, and I did not know what was happening to me, and I really struggled. And so I sought out therapy, sort of a more neurologically based therapy, to try and process my emotions so I could continue my job, because I felt absolutely paralyzed. So I understand it, I've been through it, and since then I have lots of discussions about how we can find our way through it. And very quickly, I'll say two things. One is that through the process of doing it, I understood that it's kind of obvious, but we don't think of it that way, because society says, anxiety, depression, you must be happy. If you're not feeling happy, that's really negative. Oh my God, shove it away, shove it down. And instead, it's reframing that to go, your body's feeling anxious because it's telling you something. It's working properly. It's telling you something in your environment is going wrong. So thank your body, first of all. Don't see it as a negative emotion. Embrace it, figuratively, and then process it. So with the help of an expert, of a professional, you train yourself to sort of lean into the emotion, and then weirdly it dissipates. That's a very kind of pitted story of how you can actually process these emotions, and therefore you feel able to continue your work. And then it made me think about how in society, because we classically view those emotions are negative and we're so terrified of them, it keeps us unable to lean into some of the uncomfortable truths we need to all wake up to about the future of our planet. For most people, it is too overwhelming. And that's why we haven't reached a critical mass of people that we actually need to shift the needle so that policy will change. And so then we're on our way to the sustainable, bright, wonderful future we all deserve on this planet. And it's not our fault. It's the societal system's fault. And I work in media, but we are battered with negative news, some of which we don't need to hear on such a regular level, instead of all the great things that are happening. Because very quickly, I need to tell you that environmental law organizations, conservation organizations, all sorts of different experts are chipping away at the stuff that needs to be chipped away at, but we're not being told about it in the news. And so our bandwidth is kept very, very small. We're basically afraid, terrified, very feeling sort of very negative. And then, because we're not helped by society to deal with those emotions, we're just incapable of leaning into the truth of what we're dealing with. I hope that makes sense, but it's been a really eye-opening journey for me to understand that that has to be a part of the puzzle. We need to take care of ourselves through what ultimately we have all caused, through mostly no fault of our own, but like as a global society, this is our responsibility. Most of us can't lean into it. You are, supportive of the Wildlife Trust. You are not the majority. The majority of people can't listen to a lot of the stuff you're aware of and that you care passionately about. And it's our responsibility to bring those people with us and to encourage them to be part of the solutions. But at the moment, they feel too overwhelmed with a minuscule bandwidth because constantly they're battered with bad news. Why is it that our news headlines are full of bad news? Why can't we hear about Client Earth winning a court case against polluters and shutting down a coal mine? as our news headlines, and then maybe one bad news story. Why? What is that about? So there needs to be a deeper transformation, a deeper sort of holding of hands and going, do you know what? That's not the lives we want to lead. We can do better, and we deserve better. So there's a lot to tackle and challenge, but it's all there, and all the solutions are there, and there's so much more good stuff than we imagine that is happening in different sectors as well.
And that is an incredibly powerful note to finish on. I can't believe that we're out of time already, Liz.
I ramble a lot, I'm so sorry.
There are so many important things that you've said there, and I think the positive ways in which we, in the Scottish Wildlife Trust and in the wider Wildlife Trust movement, can offer people the chance to take action and find those kindred spirits, other people who are also wanting to do the same thing, so that it's less overwhelming.
We are understanding that it's about conservation, it's about nature, but it's about people, it's about community, it's about, we have the power as a trust. You guys have just blown me away. I'm so impressed, and it's been an amazing trip. And then as a federation, and then as all the supporters and members, we have so much power to help to transform all those aspects. It's not just about nature, it's about the whole holistic picture that we're very well placed to all play a part in. Not just, the biologist experts, but every single one of you and all of your friends and all your family members. That's where I get my hope and my optimism from.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. We really appreciate it. I know we're going to hear from you again a little bit later for the time capsule, but I'm going to hand back to Kenny for our next speaker.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Liz.
So many ideas and so many things I hope you'll be pondering for the future. Maybe we should have a good 10 o'clock news rather than a bad 10 o'clock news. There's a bit of a balance. So thanks, Liz, for a lot of inspiration and all power to your presidency, so to speak, if that doesn't sound like a loaded comment in these times. So now it's a great pleasure to welcome to the stage Cal Major, who we've barely met there. We were sitting beside each other, which is the first time that I've been in proximity with Cal. We haven't properly met yet, but I'm sure you will know her name really famously as the first person to stand up paddleboard all the way from Land's End to John O'Groats, first off, and then also paddleboard around the coast of Scotland. I would admit considerable envy of somebody who has got the postural presence, if you like, to be able to use a paddleboard seriously at all. I've tried a number of times, and hopefully no videos were being taken at the time. I can see the attraction, but I don't have the skills that you do. And I know you had many adventures on the way, some of which I've heard through the media. And Cal, now you can follow her through different media, not least on YouTube. Again, in terms of unalloyed envy, I was looking at one of your films of going out to the Skerries in the Sound of Arisaig recently, a beautiful part of the world, and the Isle of Egg, where the Scottish Wildlife Trust has a unique partnership with the people on Egg and the Highland Council, sometimes in the background. So, and you also have your own charity, Seaful. So, anyway, it's just a great privilege to be able to welcome Cal Major.
Sure.
Well, if that hasn't moved and inspired you, I don't know what will. Yeah. Thank you so much, Cal, for the inspiration, for the dedication. Yeah, I feel I'm finding it hard to actually put some words together here. We're so fortunate to have people in our country, and we've heard several of them today, who can give us that determination to keep on, to be inspired, and to work for nature as you're doing, Cal. And I think we're going to need to have a short break before we reconvene for the time capsule. And I think probably if the audience is feeling that I'm doing at the moment, I think it's a good chance to just sort of take in some of the things that you've been saying and maybe ask you at break time. So thank you, including it's great to hear that there's somebody else who's a real fan of that lovely smell of fishy seabird poo during the summer. I feel my summer is not complete unless I've got a guff from a guillemot cliff or something like that. So thank you for being one of our little niche group here. And once again, actually for both Liz and for Cal this afternoon, please put your hands together with very, very warm applause. I think we better press on here, because we're now moving on to our time capsule part of the proceedings. But first off, there's an important announcement to make, that there's been a find in the ladies' loos near the exit of a wedding ring. So is there anybody in this hall? Oh, there's a hand there. Oh, that's brilliant. So it's your ring. Pete Haskell has got it. And, oh, that's fantastic. You don't know. I think we should have a round of applause to the crowd. Wow. That was simpler than we thought, and I'm sure you're mightily relieved. So blood pressure will be going down in row 5 there. Great. Okay, well, welcome back. This is now time for our time capsule panel. I think people can come up in a little bit here. Oh, I don't know where the controllers... Oh, there it is. Right. So I don't know, is it easiest for the panellists to go up right now, actually? So welcome back to front of house, Liz Bonnin, Cal Major, Sarah Robinson and Libby Smith. Actually, Libby hasn't been up front yet, so is Libby here? Yep, there we are. Libby's one of our young leaders. Program, so I'll just let you get seated there. While you're getting seated, can move in. So maybe like me, you'd be thinking, well, what's in this time capsule? What's the deal here? So to celebrate our 60 years of campaigning and championing Scottish wildlife, we're curating a unique time capsule of items that the hope is that these will represent key moments in the Trust's history, as well as our vision for the future. The capsule itself is that finely crafted wooden box that's on the table beside the panellists, and that's been specially designed for us by CCI Scotland, which I think is a community enterprise. Yep, Jill's nodding there. So thank you to CCI Scotland. And it was created from locally sourced sustainable wood from Lanarkshire, close to our Falls of Clyde Reserve. And Falls of Clyde also is a World Heritage Site, as you probably know. The capsule will be sealed shut at a parliamentary event in November, and will remain closed until the Scottish Wildlife Trust's 100th anniversary in 2064. So I look forward to seeing the majority of us back there in 2060. It won't be buried in the ground, but will go on display at our visitor centres before being stored safely away, and I don't have details of that for safety reasons, for the next 40 years.
No.
And we've already got several items in the capsule chosen by our staff, and today we'll be adding some more items, including one chosen by you, the audience, both here and online, and by our panellists. And some of the objects in the trust, some of the objects in the capsule already include items that represent what it means to be a trust supporter in 2024, including the latest copy of Scottish Wildlife magazine, edited by Pete Haskell, who's over here, and an animal adoption pack. We've also, which is a fundraiser in case you think we're going to put any animals into the box here. So, we've also got a copy of our reserves guide in there to show the incredible range of places that we're currently managing for nature. We've got some maps, including the current distribution of beavers in Scotland, as well as red and grey squirrels. What will these maps look like in 2064? Well, with all those species, not least beavers, you can know that even the last 10 years has seen rather a dramatic change in what's going on. So with a nod to beavers and our part in the official trial release of beavers in Knapdale, we've included a chip of beaver-chewed wood, as appreciated by Liz, but this time rather than Loch O'Lowes, it's from across in Knapdale, I think. So there's a chip of that in the box to mark that milestone. Looking forwards, we've got some letters for the future from children who attend our Glasgow and Isle of Egg Wildlife Watch groups. I think maybe got a picture. Oh, right, you've got beaver chips. Oh, right, I didn't realise. This is, thank you. Yeah. My notes didn't have this, so get your eye in because you'll probably be seeing more beaver chips near you. I won't make the obvious joke about them, but yeah, and that's some of the ideas from the children. We're thinking also that some of the children that put together this will be tomorrow's conservation champions and help to create the change that they want to see for Scotland's wildlife, because most of the people that contributed to this are still only a few years old. So now we can find out what our panellists this afternoon will be adding to the time capsule collection. We've given each panellist one free pass, something they're guaranteed inclusion. They'll then have to argue the case to have a second item included, which will be decided by you, the audience, this afternoon. So get ready to vote at the end. I think I'll leave the voting thing for now. Yep, okay. I'm just trying to get the sequence right so we don't have any corruption of our time capsule contents election here. And I'll just move through our panellists in alphabetical order of surnames. Each of them, hope, will only take maximum of a couple of minutes to say their piece about what they want to see in there, and I'll begin by asking Liz Bonnin what you would put in the time capsule, Liz.
I'm really annoyed that my surname starts with a B because I wanted to hear everybody else's, especially for the one we have to debate anyway. The first item that I would like to put in is a photograph of myself, which sounds very egotistical, but it's because it's with the young leaders that I met yesterday from the Scottish Wildlife Trust, Laura and Stuart and Jessie and Libby and Rachel, because it represents connection, which I think is the core of everything, reconnecting to each other before we reconnect to nature, actually. The sharing of ideas, cross-generational, cross-origins, personal stories from different minds, hearts, and passions, so that collectively we can do a better job in re-inspiring better custodianship of the planet. So that's what excites me. That's what this photograph represents. But also, I asked the young leaders what they would like to see in 40 years' time have changed when this box is opened again. And there were two sort of main thoughts. The first is the right to a clean environment. That's now in 40 years' time, and hopefully way before that, firmly written into law, into the way we do things, so that the environment is protected in everything that we do. And the other main sort of idea that came out of our conversation was the diversity of voices. And EDI is a big piece as well when it comes to the conservation sector, and in fact, all sectors of society. And we're working very hard across the Federation to better tackle it within our sector, but also to help address the issues that start from the day we're born, actually, and when we go to school, and the conscious and unconscious biases that perhaps tell young people of different colours, of different backgrounds, of different religions, that they don't belong in the conservation sector. So that was something we discussed as well, that I'm very passionate about, obviously. So those are the two main things that we would like to see in 40 years' time sorted. But also, actually, one last thing that they did mention is greater agency for young voices, not just as their roles to encourage other young people to join, but their roles at the table when there's executive board meetings, because their ideas matter. And oftentimes they've retained a lot of the passion that sometimes gets knocked out of us when we get into sort of more formulaic ways of doing things. So that was the third one. Did I go on way longer than 2 minutes? I probably did.
I think just a tad over, but
thanks,
fine
Kenny.
with that's all right. Yeah. Okay, so now passing on to Cal Major for your...
Oh, it's the other way around, but that's okay. I can talk about this one first. So I was actually going to... that's fine, I'll talk about this one. This is a less easy sell anyway. So this is Merle, and I touched on Merle when I spoke to you before, and I've got a little jar with a couple of pieces in it. And Merle is a coralline algae, which is basically Scotland's equivalent of a coral reef, which grows at just 1 millimetre per year. And it is such an incredibly important part of the ecosystem, and I think a totally unsung hero, because not many people know about it. And the reason I want to include it in the time capsule is, when we come on to my other one, I'll explain this a little bit more as well, is that this, without this, we don't have the charismatic species that everybody cares about, like the whales. The Merle is where the herring spawn, which is what the whales eat. So if we don't have Merle, we don't have herring, and we don't have whales. Everybody's excited about protecting the whales, but nobody's excited about protecting the Merle. We have these marine protected areas which are supposed to protect species like this, which in some places are just paper parks. So what I would really, really like to see in 40 years' time is proper spatial management of our marine areas, where we have marine protected areas which allow things like this tiny, slow-growing coral to flourish, to thrive, and to once again be a massive hotspot for herring spawning, so that we get to see whales in a loch. And this year, so I live in Ullapool, where we live amongst the Westeros Marine Protected Area, which is protected specifically for Merle, so that's the priority marine feature there. And this year we're seeing herring back for the first time in a long time, and we've had over 7 different humpbacks in the Minch just outside of our loch just this year, which is amazing. So I feel like there is hope. And I'd also, this kind of symbolises more than just a specific species for me. It symbolises a need for us to have a greater appreciation of the ecosystem as a whole, not just of individual species, but of how they all interconnect and how they all impact us. Our ocean provides more than half the oxygen we breathe. It's essential for every single one of us living on this planet that wants to breathe oxygen and drink water. It's so important, and I think Merle is a bit of a indicator of that. I'm just checking my notes to check I've not left anything. Yeah. So And I really hope that in 40 years, we've got amazing protected meal beds full of spawning herring and loads of whales.
Thank you. And moving on alphabetically to Sarah Robinson, our Director of Conservation.
Thanks, Kenny. So not at all a hard act to follow. There's a picture there of the Little Aston Tree Nursery, which just north of Ullapool, those familiar with the Trust will know we've got our Coygan Ascent living landscape, huge area of the northwest that we've been working in now for well over 10 years, and which includes our largest reserve, Benmore Coyac. So what I would like to put in the box is our ambition and our challenge, a map of the woodland potential for that whole area. And the picture there is of the tree nursery, which we have up in that area, which is supplying a lot of the trees that are currently being planted, but not really at the rate we could realise woodland expansion. And some of that's because of the deer challenge that many of you will be aware of in Scotland, and we were just up last week, as Jo mentioned in her look forward, undertaking a thermal drone survey, so we'll have some really good numbers to base discussions on about where we go from here with the deer in the northwest, and how we manage them to support woodland expansion. So the map is a map that was created a number of years ago now, but we haven't realised the potential it showed for the woodlands in the northwest. I would like to think that we will, and certainly will have even gone beyond that in the next 40 years. But I think it's sort of a challenge to the Trust and ourselves and our partners within the Coygan Ascent living landscape by putting it in the box to say, we've stated we're going to do that. And I think it's really interesting, or it would be from my perspective, opening the box, because it's not the sort of thing that's easily captured in the sort of data sphere. You know, the data is of what it is now and what it is, you know, what it was. We don't often sort of capture that ambition somewhere. So I think having that sort of aspirational map in there would be really good.
And moving on to Libby Smith, representing our young leaders, who, from the reaction, you've seen that Libby's got an unusual choice here. So, Libby, the floor is yours to justify artificial grass.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you, firstly, so much for having me. I'm so honoured to be sitting alongside this panel here and listening to the talks today. I don't know about you, I was crying during that last movie there. It was really hit home for me. So thank you very much to everyone for this. So yes, as said there, my name's Libby. I'm a young leader for the Scottish Wildlife Trust. What I'm going to do is just quickly introduce the young leaders for those of you who may not have heard of us, and then try and justify the artificial grass. Young leaders, I've been a young leader for 2 years now. The group formed in 2018, and it's made up of a group of 20 to 30 year olds based across the whole of Scotland. And what we do is aim to inspire and empower other young people to take climate action. We also aim to amplify the voices of young people in environmental decision making. And then we also amplify trust campaigns and support organisations to involve young people as well. And then we also promote transparency and address ongoing environmental challenges head on. So we have a full range of things of what we do in with the Young Leaders group. Which is led by Rachel, our amazing engagement officer. We have, every other week we have online meetings. We also meet in person as well and organise events. Some of the things we've managed to do and opportunities that I've had is go to the Sea Scotland conference, the Gen C Youth Marine Policy event at the Scottish Seabird Centre. We held a biodiversity bonanza at the Falls of Clyde. And then a couple of weeks ago, there was also a beaver watch, which some of the other young leaders went to, and saw some beavers at the Loch of Lowes. And then there was also a national webinar held online for wildcats, and over £500 was raised, which was amazing. So that's introduction to us. As mentioned, my item is artificial grass, the first one. it was something that was decided as a team with the other young leaders during one of our weekly meetings. As you already probably know, artificial grass made of plastic. Although natural grass can absorb CO2, artificial grass requires so much CO2 in order to produce it. It also takes a huge amount of time to break down artificial grass. And even when it does, it then creates microplastics, which we all know is really destructive. Scottish Wildlife Trust have done a lot of work in advocating for natural green urban landscapes. And obviously there's the ongoing wildflower meadow campaign, which is great. So we hope by 2064 there is a greater abundance and greater accessibility to healthy, natural green space in urban areas, which support biodiversity and provide much more pleasant environment for people to live in. And then also we want it so that we put it in the box now, and then by 2064 people open it and they're like, what is that? What is that? It's just not used, so that is our ambition for that. So,
Thanks very much. And I mean, will we find out what the free pass things are for everyone, or is it just put?
That was the free pass.
That was the free pass.
They're in.
Okay, sorry.
They're in.
Oh, that's your.
Now I get
Yeah, because you were doing such good pitches for it. I thought you were, say vote for this. So that is the free pass. So if we go back to Liz, now it's time to make the case for something you want the audience to vote on. I think from the applause all around, your ones, the 4 that have been put up here are great. So they are all in the box. That's a done deal. But what do you want us?
Just really quickly, I do have a different photograph here. You must have been confused. But anyway, slightly different picture. What am I? It doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, this is a Scots pine cone. And actually, Scots pines are the only true native pines of the UK. So in itself, this is emblematic of something very, very special from Scotland especially. Scots pines support a whole raft of species, from inverts to birds to mammals. But also they make really good osprey nesting trees. And the reason why I want to put this in the box is because it represents the biodiversity that it supports, but also ospreys, which in themselves are an incredible conservation success story after being hunted to extinction. I think the last breeding pair was around 1916. Then they were reintroduced, and Scotland now hosts 250 breeding pairs. So hopefully in 40 years' time, those numbers will have gone up again. And it's also testament to what we can do when we're at our best, how we can recover nature. But then there's this great story about an osprey pair. So do any of you follow the cam from Loch of the Lows that's on, yeah? So you probably know this story already, okay? But for those of you who don't, I was blown away by this yesterday. So there's been a breeding pair on this amazing tree where the Scottish Wildlife Trust team put a webcam on, and apparently it's incredibly popular, not only in the UK, but all across the world. And this breeding pair has been quite successful. The male has been around for ages, and together they have had 7 chicks. And this particular year, just gone, they had laid a couple of eggs. I think it was 3 eggs. But then the male was going off to hunt as the female was on the nest, and the male sadly disappeared. He didn't return to the nest, and the female was on the nest for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 days, 6 days, until eventually she had to get off the nest to go find some food, and unfortunately then the eggs perished. This is where it gets very dramatic. A new male arrives. He's called the pale male because of his markings, and he is a disruptor, and he destroyed the eggs. Now, in a way, he might have done the female a bit of a favor, because she might have stayed on the nest longer trying to get the eggs to hatch, and then she would either have perished or not been able to be strong enough, have had enough food herself to make the huge journey back to Africa. But then this other male shows up called the Dark Intruder. I love how you've named him. And the name sort of alludes to a interesting, bold, intrepid character, and nothing could be further from the truth, or so it seems. This young male He's a bit new, he's finding his way, but he starts to try to court the female. So he starts to present different types of twigs for the nest, but they're rubbish. They're like Christmas tree types of sticks. And the female is looking at him and is looking at the sticks, and she just shoves all the sticks out of the nest because they're useless. And also as a male, when the other male, the pale male arrives, males need to shove off, like to sort of fight off any sort of usurpers to the throne as they're trying to assert their authority and hopefully mate with this female. But instead, when another male would appear, our dark intruder would just go off and try and find more sticks to please the female. Now, you could argue that that's actually quite endearing, and there's other strategies to be successful, but ultimately it didn't really work. Now, what's really interesting, though, you might think, this poor guy doesn't have a chance. He's never going to have offspring of his own. But interestingly, the female is bonding with this male. Now, it was too late in the season to breed again, so she didn't lay any more eggs. She departed about 10 days before he departed. So it's all to play for next March when the female returns. Site fidelity exists, obviously, in ospreys. She will most likely return to the nest. And who is going to get to mate with her? The pale male who destroyed the eggs, or the dark intruder who's not, he doesn't have too many of the traits that you might imagine would make a successful male. So I, for one, am now completely invested, and I shall be eyes peeled on the cam to see what happens in March, and I'm sure many of you will be too. You think drama and intrigue only happens in soap opera as well. Nature is far, far, far more interesting. So that's why this pine is going in, this pine cone is going in, and also it'll be interesting to see. We'll have all the records in 40 years' time about what happened to that female and all of her offsprings. So I hope you vote for me.
Do I have to go next? I'm voting for the ospreys. Okay. Please, could I have my photo? Okay, so I've got two pictures actually, which are going in as a job lot. And I was going to be, thought I was arguing for the merle, which was going to be way harder than arguing for a humpback whale, because everybody loves a humpback. So I'm just going to hold these up so that you can see. This is the one that you can see on the screen, and then this is the other one that you can see, which is a living humpback whale with a rainbow coming out of his blow, which to me symbolises hope. So the first one is a picture of an entangled whale. This is unfortunately, another juvenile whale that we found actually in Lochbroom, which is just where I live, earlier this year. Entanglement scars around its tail, which would suggest that it's been entangled in creel pots. And to me, the fact that entanglement is even a thing is crazy. We can fly to the moon as a human species, we can fly to the moon, and yet we have entanglement as an issue in our inshore waters that hasn't been solved. And everybody who needs to make these policy changes knows how important whales are. We know that they are absolutely essential as carbon stores. We know that they have an enormous monetary value. The International Monetary Fund put the value of every single whale, each whale, as more than $2 million because of the ecosystem services that they provide and the ecotourism opportunities. Humpback whales like this, they migrate, they have one of the biggest migrations of the world. They're one of the most incredible species, and yet they are not safe in Scottish waters. A study recently suggested that the level of entanglement in Scotland is not conducive to a year-round humpback population. And a very, very conservative estimate suggests that at least 6 humpbacks and 30 minke whales are entangled every single year in Scottish waters. Now, the reason I also wanted to show this is because I didn't want it all to be doom and gloom. This was my first ever live humpback whale that I saw in Ullapool this year, in the Minch, actually, just outside of Ullapool. And we've got a beautiful shot of him with a rainbow in his spray. And this, to me, symbolises hope. And hope, to me, is also coming from technologies that are being developed to help mitigate the impacts of creel fishing, such as using weighted lines in between the creels. So creel fishing, for any of you who don't know, it's the little pots that sit, well, they're not always that little actually, the pots that sit on the seabed, and they're baited for things like prawns and lobsters to crawl into. And you get a fleet of creels which are all attached to each other by lines, and then they have 2 vertical lines at the end. And most of the entanglements with humpbacks happens in the bottom lines between the creels, because they form a loop in the water, because they're buoyant. And something that's been trialled this year is weighting those ropes that they sit on the floor of the seabed so that these humpbacks aren't getting entangled, which is fantastic. And the reason it's happened is that conservation organisations have been working with fishing communities, with local creel fishers. Rather than creating an us and a them, they've been actually having conversations on the ground, and the fishers have come to the people who can make the changes, and they are making incredible moves to stop this from being an issue, because no creel fisher wants to go out and entangle a whale in their pots. So the fact that this is being a really beautiful conversation, and a really positive and constructive conversation, brings me a lot of hope as well. So I would like to see, by the time that this capsule is opened, that whale entanglements or cetacean entanglements in Scottish waters is no longer an issue, because funds have been invested in the technologies which allow low-impact fishing to happen at the same time as whales swimming freely in our beautiful waters, and basically there's no more entanglement. So that's my... Oh, it's 2 million. Oh, sorry, it's 2 million a whale, not $1 million that they're worth.
Sarah.
Okay. So 700 metres west of Stronsay Island in the Orkneys is Lingerholm, and that is one of the Trust reserves, and also one of the world's largest breeding populations of grey seals. So I would like to get a recording of that population on Lingerholm at peak pupping, when it's going to be a cacophony of noise, and put that in the box. And I hope that when they open the box, they can hear that noise in lots of different places. And it isn't a case that it is a sort of example of a shifting baseline where they're sort of shocked and amazed by this noise that they hear. So I sort of put it in for 2 reasons. Hopefully that we will get to sort of, when we open the box, there'll be a situation where that's not just a few sites in the world where you can hear such a dense population of seals. But I really, really hope that it's actually not the other end of the scale, which would be that the baseline's shifted and people are amazed that they were ever that dense in the past. So yeah, it would be that. And I think also sounds are just so evocative, as smells are, as people have mentioned, of places. I'm not sure. This is actually taken in the summer, so this wouldn't be peak pupping, but it's, I don't know if it'll click.
Yeah, better. It's on the next one.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of a footage that I took last summer when we were there. But it's a beautiful place, and the trust has Lingerholm and Little Lingerholm as 2 small islands, uninhabited, up in the Orkneys, 2 of the 5 reserves we've got up there. But they're brilliant sites for grey seals. Really special place, especially when you get a day like that, which isn't often. But yeah, he's just bobbing straight up in the water with his nose out. So vote for me.
Okay, Libby, follow the first 3. Difficult.
I really don't know how I'm going to follow this. Okay, so second item that I have decided to choose is an embroidered microphone. There is some obviously amazing work that is going on across the Scottish Wildlife Trust in terms of upskilling communities, for example, through the Next Door Nature programme, and then also the engagement events that like different community groups are doing and the young leaders are doing as well. And it's all great. But I think there is more work that needs to be done to engage young people in these conversations and get them involved. Leading up to COP26, you may have heard that hundreds of young people across the UK contributed through a series of through an online survey and a series of in-person workshops, completing those surveys. And this resulted in a youth manifesto for action in climate change, which highlights changes that young people want to see from government, businesses, and individuals. So, some of the results, 88% of young people thought that businesses aren't taking enough action to tackle the climate emergency. Then also, 87% of young people don't think that governments are taking enough action to reduce climate change emissions and tackle climate change. So, another little quote that was taken from one of the surveys is that it's not about blame anymore, it's about action. We need action, and we need it now, and who better to implement those changes than the government? They need to lead the way and make solid decisions on how we fight the crisis. So, what I hope by 2064 is that the voices of young people play an active role in the decision-making process during environmental discussion. I hope to see more young people attending engagement events such as these today. And then I also hope that if we do a survey in 2064, that we see a total shift in the views of young people with hope and optimism expressed. And I really believe that we can do that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you all for really strong pitches there, hard choices. But now's the time that you, as the audience, can actually vote on your preferences for this. So if you have access to a smartphone, or if not, there's something else we can do, but if you have access to a smartphone, you can have a few minutes to vote which of the last 4 items you'd most like to see go into the time capsule. I'll recap those ones just in a minute. But there are also slips of paper at the end of each row in case you're not able to use the QR code way. So I can see that people are scanning that at the moment. And oh, right, yeah, before we get, I'll get them to vote, but equally then ask for some questions. Yeah. They could be voting as well, I think. And then we'll go on to the volunteer awards. Oh, right, okay. Just before people start voting. Oh, I see, right, okay. I've just been informed that there's been electoral malpractice here, actually, and I should have given you the option of actually, on a hustings style, really, asking some questions. So I don't know if you've already voted, then, you know, congratulations to the really fast on the button ones. But if anybody would like to ask a question of anybody on the panel, then we have our glamorous assistants at either side of the auditorium here who can come and provide you with a microphone. Any questions on what you've heard? And I'll remind you, the nominees so far are Scots Pinecone, Humpback Whale, Lingahome Grey Seals, and the embroidered microphone. So we've got a question at the back there.
Indeed. My question is, how are you going to get a whale in that box? But actually, what I really wondered was, actually this thing wants me to fill in this form for Microsoft. Is that also necessary?
No. It shouldn't. Oh. That's what he wanted to ask. This is great. We're off the hook.
We're off the hook.
Yeah, I thought it was a serious one. Oh, no. How many chicks did the first mayor 2 years ago?
Are we okay with that, Peter? And do you know?
Oh, there we go.
I think once you voted, you can just ignore the request to sign in.
Okay, right. So a question in the middle here.
Hi, it's in connection with creeling and the danger to marine cetaceans. We were talking about having the lines weighted so that they're on the ground. But I've also heard, and I don't know how developed this technology is, that the vertical lines can actually be sunk and only be recovered with a radio signal. So that's another instance of improvement. Do you think that will be recognised in time for our time capsule to be opened?
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking that. Yes, I really hope it is, because like I was saying, we can create these amazing technologies for all other aspects of humanity, and we can do it for this as well. So there is a remote control release mechanism whereby basically the skipper of the boat can have a GPS location of where the creel is, and then they sail over the top of it, press a button, and it releases a rope which is coiled at the bottom, which then pops up on a buoy to the top of the surface so that they can pull the buoys up, the creels up. It's in development at the minute. It's been trialled in a couple of places in the US. It is insanely expensive, like insanely expensive. So at the minute, totally not, like, there would be no capacity to roll that out amongst the whole Scottish creel fleet. Even the weighted ropes, it needs funding by the Scottish government, really, to help roll it out more widely, because it means people replacing all their ropes. So this is why, for me, this whole kind of concept of cetacean entanglement is really interesting, because as humanity, we have the capacity to do some amazing things, and we totally have the capacity to eliminate cetacean entanglement in our waters if we have the political and the kind of societal will to make it happen.
May I add something to that? We filmed a story about the northern right whale of the east coast of America about that exact issue, except over there it's for lobster and crab pots, particularly lobster pots. And this was about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago. And they were trialling different release systems for exactly what you were talking about. And the issue is cost. And it kind of comes back to the conversation I had with Jo earlier on. It's not that the fishing industry is to blame. It's that it's stuck in that loop of, that costs me too much, so therefore it's not competitive, so therefore I can't afford to do it. Or if it's a bigger kind of, bigger business or organization, their shareholders will be answering to their return, will be demanding their returns. And a lot of the arguments at the moment across all industries are, look, we need economic growth, right? As if that's kind of, we can't have any other way of doing life. Listen, we need economic growth. So obviously our shareholders need a modest return, which that's marred with lots of problems, because what is modest? And oftentimes with the water pollution industry problem, it's billions of pounds that could be going into infrastructure. But ultimately what we're talking about here is an interconnected web of issues that need to be tackled in order for us to really get to the core problem of solving our conservation issues and creating a truly sustainable planet. And that means leaning into our economic model. When you mentioned puzzle pieces, which I loved, again, it's about getting overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, we can't do our work unless that's fixed. How are we going to fix that? There are ecological economists working to transform, evolve capitalism so that we no longer prioritize profit above everything else. It is happening, we just don't hear about it. But that is another, every example, if you pick any species, any habitat, any issue, oftentimes the biggest stumbling block is cost. And it's not the fishers' fault. It's the fact that they're stuck in a system that doesn't allow them to spend more money, and therefore then they're out of the loop and they can't actually make a living. Yeah. So it's a very interesting, yet again, another example of how we've got to think holistically to really create a sustainable planet.
Spotted somebody there. Yeah.
We're going to work together. If I beat you, I'll be happy to work with you.
Thank you very much. Given the fragility of digital connectivity, in one form or another, each of your proposals is linked to digital connectivity, GPS, one form or another. So my question is, in the event of a global outage, which is very, very possible, do you have a plan B for your proposals?
That's a huge question.
Yes, it's a very important question.
It's a very important question.
Thank
and
you.
A huge one. Who wants to start?
I think you should.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a bash. Let's be real here. It's going to cause massive problems across the board. I'm currently working on a project with tech industries when it comes to sort of data collection and getting better data to better protect the planet. These big companies that are working with data are aware of the issues if we have outages. There are certain mitigation processes in place. I feel like this is a very skirting around the issue here because I don't have the answer for you of needing to trust that that piece of the puzzle is being dealt with, that we couldn't really reinvent our proposals. We need to rely on what we have at our disposal, sort of. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not answering your question, am I really? I think it's something of concern, but I think, again, it's down to those experts in the tech industry to make sure that should that happen, there are fallback loops and fallback sort of systems in place so that the whole infrastructure of the way we live doesn't collapse, because we're talking about energy, banks, communication, the whole thing. You could argue this would be the least of our problems. Do you know what I mean? So it's not really answering your question, but I think we've just got to trust that those in charge of that piece of the puzzle are going to make sure that it doesn't happen to such an extent that we are in serious trouble. That's not very useful, is it?
A quite political answer almost, like the politicians would do
I'll get my coat. The shame I am feeling right now. It's because it's not my area of expertise, and therefore I've just got to trust. But that's a very good point you've just made there. I'm going to have to rethink. I will never do that again.
So sorry, I think that was a really good answer, and I'm so glad Liz went first because I had no idea how to answer that. And actually, if I could just say what she said, then I would. However, I have a slightly naughty way of approaching mine, which is that actually the industry we're talking about, the creel fishing industry, is a pretty low-tech industry, all things told. We're talking about a couple of guys on a boat they know where their fishing grounds are. The creels go down onto the seabed. They get hauled up the next day, hopefully, with what they're hoping to catch in them. My proposal to eliminate, or at least massively reduce entanglement in Scottish waters, can be hugely impacted just by using weighted rope on the seabed. A lot of the humpback entanglements are because of the bottom lines. So even without those vertical ropes with the GPS, I feel like, so I don't know what the exact stats are, but even without the vertical ropes being addressed, just by addressing the bottom ropes, we can make a massive, massive difference. It's just a case of, like Liz was saying before, finding funding for this kind of stuff and it not coming down to the individual fishers. Like Liz was saying, these fishermen, they're not baddies, and I hate this way that oftentimes we look at people who live different lives to us and utilise the Earth's resources in different ways to us. Yes, sometimes it's incredibly extractive and destructive, but things like the creel fishing industry, oftentimes it is just a few guys in an otherwise really low impact fishery making a living, as they have done for many, many years, who don't want to go out and catch a whale and who desperately are begging for an answer to this issue. And so I think for me, the kind of creel fishing industry, it needs to be spatially managed, better understood and better supported to become the low impact fishery that it can be. And I think of all the kind of sectors of the fishing industry, this is the one that truly supports local people in local places. So I think that if there was a shortage and we couldn't have the beautiful remote controlled vertical lines, we could at least still have weighted lines, which would make a big difference. Yeah.
Much more practical answer.
I'm going to go full practical, and I would record it on a record. And I would put a design for a wind-up record player in the box with the record, so everyone can hear it.
I love that.
It's brilliant. So it's like, isn't it Voyager 1 has got something out there with lots of stuff on it. I think we're going to have to draw the questions to a close at the moment here. And although I was jumping the gun, as you could see with this, if you still need to vote, then please vote for your choice of those Scots pinecone, humpback whale, Lincoln grey seals, and embroidered microphone. But that makes it sound much, much, much less than any of the four panellists described. Because to see the world in a grain of sand, I mean, you all just went woomph out from the micro to the macro there. So while you're voting, we'll move on to hear a few clips from Words of the Wild, which is our podcast series, which is created as part of the Trust's wider 60th anniversary celebrations. So this is our first foray into the world of podcasting, and thank you very much for the people that have made that possible. And basically, I hope that you've heard some of the podcasts so far. I think the whole series is actually up and available online. But as a wee taster of that, this is just a bit, if my grasp of this works okay, then can I? I'm a Mac user, so all right. Okay, sorry. Yep. There we are.
People's perception of beavers ranged greatly from they're brilliant, absolutely perfect animals to, oh no, this is the worst thing you could actually ever do. So I think a big part of the challenge was just showing people what they did and how they could, in theory, slot back into Scotland. And a big part of people being able to come and see beavers in a naturalised habitat was just to kind of, bust some of these myths of what this species actually does.
So many people getting out in the water, enjoying loads of different activities from paddleboarding, snorkeling, kayaking, wild swimming. Especially since the pandemic, these sorts of activities have really increased in popularity. And there's such an immersive, powerful way to just get people connected to nature, Even when you get to the beach, like this beautiful stretch where we're at just now, just thinking about what's going on under the waves is incredible. So to actually get the chance to pop your head under and see the colours, the movement, the different types of marine life there, it's an incredible way to get people to open their eyes, literally, to that amazing world.
In the past, people were trying to drain peatlands because they were trying to exploit them for agriculture. So many of our peat bogs, you can still see the evidence of these attempts to drain them, which involves digging ditches across them to get the water away from the peat bog to drive them out. So a lot of our work has been trying to reverse that process. That usually involves us placing dams on these ditches to hold the water onto the peat, to re-wet the peat, and then it becomes to try and restore the peat to a more healthy state so that some of these organisms which rely on them can have a more secure future, and they can thrive on these peatlands.
There's constant reports coming out that we're one of the most nature-deprived countries in Europe. We've also got this term that's been vocalised, nature deprivation, and it's true, there's a massive disconnect. Go outside, go for a walk, just go and sit somewhere and connect with it at a level that you're actually conscious of. So many times we just walk by a woodland and we take it for granted. We're not actually involving ourselves in our surroundings. And I think there's a time that we need to actually do this. We're in such a fast-paced life where everything is now, and we feel guilty if we do something for ourselves. We need to stop that. We really do, and we need to go out there and actually take time for ourselves. It'll make us happier. It'll make us healthier. We'll be able to relate to people a wee bit better. But it's just take time and notice your surroundings.
That's great. I'll move on from...
People's perception of beavers ranged greatly from they're brilliant, absolutely perfect animals to, oh no, this is the worst thing you could actually...
There we go. Yeah, so... And I think we can take that applause also for being for Pete Haskell and Ed Turpin at my left here, your right, who were really, well, I think it was Pete's idea in the first place for this. And Ed, I've met out and about in a couple of the podcasts in the Loch of the Lows that we've heard a lot about, and also over at Benmore Coigach in the Achiltibui Village Hall. So check it out if you haven't heard so far, and congratulations to the comms team basically for pulling this together. It's well worth a listen. Now, I've got the honour of announcing the results of this year's Trustees Awards for Volunteering. Basically, you probably didn't realise that there's more than 850 volunteers that work for us to help protect Scotland's wildlife for the future. And these awards today are actually celebrating the broad range of activities carried out by our volunteers, many of whom, and you've got a flavour of that in some things, brave all weathers, although actually, given Cal's presentation, I'm not sure any of our volunteers would maybe get quite up to that level. But anyway, braving all weathers to survey wildlife and help inform important conservation decisions. And some of it is down to just the hard graft of things like improving paths, for example, to ensure that our wildlife reserves remain accessible and safe places for people to connect with nature. You might not realise that actually a significant part of our reserves budget goes to the very necessary and very important work for health and safety, both to comply with the law, but just to make sure that people visiting our reserves aren't going to be hit by a falling tree, natural though that might seem. Sorry, I mustn't digress, but basically, did you know that one of the Tayside beavers, one of the mortalities that was recorded a few years ago from that population, the so-called free beavers of the Tay, when the post-mortem was done on it, and Cal knows a lot about these things, it was reckoned that it died because of being hit by a falling branch. So that seems to be pretty tough. Well, maybe a natural way for a beaver to go, but it's also quite tough for a beaver to be felled by a tree. But anyway, I do digress. So I've lost my plot now through telling you this. Sorry. But as you know, our volunteers don't just work on our reserves. There's a lot of different roles. Basically, wildlife watch groups across the country, for example, keeping those running is a big, big task. And there's many other tasks. And that includes the people that organise local events for the trusts. Some of our local groups, for example, they don't just fall out of the sky pre-formed as an evening talk or a walk or something like that. It needs the volunteers to do that. All of that has a big impact on the trust's work. And basically, it's important to remember with all of these things that this isn't a competition to identify the best volunteers among us, but it's an opportunity for staff and fellow volunteers, including trustees, to nominate groups and individuals who they would like to see recognised for their valuable contribution to the trust. So the judging panel this year was comprised of the Trust Council, led by the Trust Vice Chair for Groups and Watch, Tim Duffy, who's in foreign parts at the moment and couldn't be here. This year, there were 4 categories: Young Volunteer, Group Award, Species Champion, and Lifetime Achievement. So now it's a pleasure to announce the results of our Trustees Awards for Volunteering. And first off, for our Young Volunteer, the winner of this year's award is Annelies van Eden, who's been a long-term ranger on the Isle of Egg. And is Annelies? Yep. Would you... So it's maybe, do you want to come down, Annalise? Yeah, yeah. And the second award for group is the Nature Ninjas who work in the Cumbernauld Living Landscape. That's fantastic. And we mentioned Cumbernauld Living Landscape earlier. Fantastic project across the whole of that urban area. And the Nature Ninjas, well, you can find out more online, and that's well deserved. With that, now the next couple of awards, I don't think the people were able to join us today, but our species champion, I should have actually said, I'll go back, actually. I was getting carried away by where the things were behind me. But to explain with these two awards, so it gives you a wee bit of context, I was making a mistake because I met Annalise on Egg a few months back, and you make the mistake that you think, oh, well, everyone else knows what's been going on here. So with both these, I'll give a bit of context. So Annalise has been a long-term volunteer through spring and summer on the Isle of May. And in the view of the people on the island, the community there, and other people that know her, she's gone above and beyond to support and nurture other volunteers to do their best for both egg wildlife and the community. So she assists in a wide range of tasks there, from survey work, which is quite a bit on egg, to guided walks, to taking responsibility for health and safety. And basically, she's been described as, and I quote, an all-round superstar volunteer. So, you know, no pressure there to keep on going. And yeah, it was very good that you could actually make the journey today to get your award with that. And for the Nature Ninjas, then since 2017, Nature Ninjas have supported the Trust's Cumbernauld Living Landscape project to deliver active conservation management on the ground. And basically the citation for you, and you know, you were here accepting for the wider group, I appreciate, is always willing to learn new skills and get stuck in. They've planted over 1,000 trees and removed thousands more tree tubes. Not something that was visualised when tree tubes were first invented, to kind of stick in the ground that they're, you know, long-term problem if you don't deal with them, as well as playing a crucial role in managing wildflower meadows and controlling invasive species. They've also removed over 1,500 bags of rubbish from wildlife reserves across Cumbernauld, which is a pretty incredible effort. And that's just great work. So thank you again to both Annalise and the Nature Ninjas. And for this year's Species Champion Award, for somebody that can't be here but will get you know, something, a framed print later on, is Daisy MacDonald. And she has worked on Handa Island, that is a place close to various hearts, including Cal's down there. Basically, doing a lot of survey and monitoring of great skuas and Arctic skuas. So great skuas, as we know, have unfortunately been probably the seabird species affected most by avian flu. So the population has gone down and down and down. Handa Island is unusual. What's good in that it's got populations of both Arctic and great skuas. So Daisy has had what I hope, I'm sure, would be the pleasure of living on Handa Island for ages and helping us to monitor that. And finally, for lifetime achievement. Is there anything on the slides here that, if I keep going, sorry. So obviously multitasking here isn't necessarily my forte. Do we have a citation for the lifetime achievement on this at all? Right. Sorry. Okay, no. Yeah, so I'm afraid I don't know. Our Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Finlay Dowell for the Garnock Floods Wildlife Reserve. I'd like to say more about Finlay, but actually I don't know him, and I don't have the background here. Yeah, is there anything that we could say about Finlay? Because it seems a shame to...
Printed your notes too quickly, Kenny.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry. Oh, right. Oh, thank you very much. All right. Sorry, I can get it from this, and I'll give it back to you. So, yeah, apologies if you're listening, Finlay. We didn't mean to skim over you too quickly. But basically, Lifetime Achievement Award is going to Finlay Dowell. Again, unable to be with us today. And this award goes to a volunteer whose dedication has made a significant impact over a long period of time. Finlay was nominated for his tireless efforts at our Garnock Floods Reserve in Ayrshire. His 15 years of monthly bird counts have been instrumental in reserve management decisions that have helped to protect both the breeding and migrant and wintering birds that rely on this special place for nature. He's also almost single-handedly kept invasive Himalayan balsam from taking over Garnock floods since 2012. Basically, an incredible contribution that deserves recognition. So a round of applause in his absence to Finlay. All right, thank you. That's brilliant. And anybody that's tried to keep Himalayan balsam, Impatiens noli tangere, impatient don't touch is its scientific name, in Czech will know the challenges of that, especially if you've left it for quite a while, because if you touch the seed pod, they go like that. So can be interesting or fun for the first few seconds, and then you realise that actually what you're trying to do is really, really difficult, because where there was one plant that you were trying to tackle, it's just shot off several hundred seeds maybe to, add to the problem. It's a beautiful looking plant, but really quite an issue. So now, feel we had some seal calls earlier. We really should have some, drums here. Okay. It's always de rigueur. Thank you. Thank you very much. I should have asked you to participate earlier, actually. Wish I'd known. Okay. Right. So. Right. The panelists' choice from the four here. What will be going into our time capsule for the next 40 years will be the hump. I'm just clearing my throat there. You've guessed. It will be, and a round of applause, the humpback whale.
Thank you very much on behalf of Scotland's cetaceans. Thank you. I am shocked that that my argument was so compelling against this very, very tough competition. Thank you.
And thank you to all our panellists today for making such brilliant pitches. If there was space in this little box, then there probably is actually a humpback whale going into it.
Put Put them all in.
I was saying earlier, you know, this has got shades of Doctor Who about it. So, I mean, if the TARDIS can do it, why can't this? So, anyway, thank you for all your contributions there. And basically, I'm afraid, after what's been an immensely enjoyable day, speaking personally, I've been inspired from, you know, beginning to end, really, by what's been shared by the others that have presented and given their thoughts or reported on our state of the nation and state of the Scottish Wildlife Trust nation. For me, it's been very inspirational. I hope that it has been equally inspirational for all of you that are in the National Museum today, the people that could join us online. So I'd like to thank you, each and every one, for your participation there. And now, I think, looking to the future, you've got many things that you can take from here to look forward. And I think you can, as you've seen today, rely on the teams of people, multiples, polycentric within that. I love that word, actually. It immediately conjures up a parrot, doesn't it? But anyway, within the Trust, there are many, many different groups taking their own decisions, working on the ground, whether it's in a path, whether it's on a big scale, whether it's in meetings, to actually take things forward for us. But within that, and at the core of the Trust, we have got what is an amazing staff team. And within that staff team, first off, I'm not going to go through the whole staff, don't worry, you will get home for tea. But the person I'd like to single out today, actually, for making this event possible in combination with a range of others. But I'd like to thank Jill Hatcher. Is Jill here? Jill, do you want to speak about... And Jill's been really superb in pulling together quite a complicated programme. And you can see how even with Jill's best laid plans and also help from Claire Fleming here, actually I thought I would like to give a round of applause to Claire. Because Claire within the year is the person that more than any others keeps Jo Pike on focused on many different things, and she certainly makes sure that, given my tendency to ramble off to different things diary-wise or thought-wise, Claire is actually the person that keeps me on track, so I'm very, very obliged to that. But to you for that. But I'd also just like to thank all the staff for what they do in so many different ways, whether it's centralised staff here in Edinburgh, whether it's outposted staff, some of which are even in places like Handa Island, the lucky sods. So all those people count, and all the groups of volunteers and members who make things count on the ground in their own place. You know who they are. I hope you are one of them, both through your membership and, if you can be, through your activity for the Trust. So whichever way that you contribute to working for Scottish wildlife, to working for a better future for all the species that we share Scotland with, I wish you well in that work. Thank you for coming here today, and have a very safe journey home, during which I hope you will mull over some of the many things that have been given and shared with us today to give you inspiration for the future. It's hard times, it's difficult times, it's perhaps gloomy times for a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have hope. It doesn't mean that we should give up. We still can actually work together for change, and you're the people that can make that happen. So thank you, each and every one of you, for doing that, and have a very, very good journey home and a very good year ahead until I hope we meet again. Thank you.